For 15 years, Sarah Mitchell arrived at Riverside Middle School at 5:30 a.m. every single morning. Rain, snow, scorching heat, it didn't matter. She'd unlock the cafeteria kitchen, turn on the industrial ovens, and begin preparing lunch for 800 students. The same menu rotations, the same complaints about the food, the same invisibility that comes with serving meals to children who barely look up from their phones. But every evening, after the last student left and the kitchen was spotless, Mrs. Mitchell did something else, something no one knew about, something that kept 43 children from going hungry, something that cost her nearly everything she had. And when the school board discovered what she'd been doing, they gave themselves exactly 48 hours to decide. Fire her for health code violations and risk a lawsuit, or admit the system had been failing for years and face public outrage. By Friday at 5 p.m., Sarah Mitchell would either be vindicated or unemployed, and 43 children would either keep eating or go hungry. This is the story of a woman who fed more than bodies, who sacrificed more than anyone knew, and who had 48 hours to survive the system she tried to fix. Riverside Middle School, a public school in a mid-sized city in Ohio, 1,200 students, budget cuts every year, overcrowded classrooms, underpaid teachers, and a cafeteria that served the kind of food that made kids joke about prison being better. Sarah Mitchell, Mrs. Mitchell to everyone, never just Margaret, was 62 years old. Small frame, sharp eyes, hands weathered from decades of work. She moved through that kitchen with the efficiency of someone who'd done the same task 10,000 times. Breakfast, bagels, fruit cups, milk cartons. Lunch, pizza squares, chicken nuggets, wilted salads, canned vegetables. The food was institutional, nutritionally adequate, barely. But it was what the budget allowed. $3.47 per meal. That's what the district allocated. That's what Mrs. Mitchell had to work with. The kids complained constantly. "This tastes like cardboard. I'd rather starve. My dog wouldn't eat this." Mrs. Mitchell heard it all, said nothing, just kept serving. The teachers barely acknowledged her. The principal knew her name, but couldn't tell you a single personal detail about her life. To the school board, she was a line item in the budget. Food services staff, Mitchell S. She was furniture, background, the person who made sure the food appeared and disappeared on schedule. But here's what no one saw. Every day at 2:45 p.m., after the last lunch period ended, Mrs. Mitchell would walk to her locker in the staff room. Inside that locker were dozens of brown paper bags, each one carefully labeled with a name written in her precise handwriting. Jamie, Marcus, Deshawn, Aria, Kimberly, Tyler, Madison. Names of students who came through her line with free lunch tickets. Students whose eyes lingered a little too long on the food. Students who asked for extra portions even though they knew the rules said no. Students whose stomachs growled in the afternoon because lunch was the only meal they'd eaten that day. Mrs. Mitchell knew them all, and every single evening she packed extra food. Sandwiches made from ingredients she bought herself, fresh fruit from the grocery store, granola bars, juice boxes, crackers with peanut butter. She'd slip these bags to students quietly, a gentle hand on the shoulder, a whispered, "For later," a knowing look that said, "I see you. I know you're hungry. You're not alone." 43 students, over 15 years, thousands of meals, all paid for with her own money. A salary of $32,000 a year, after taxes, after rent, after her own groceries and bills. Mrs. Mitchell had maybe $200 left over. She spent almost all of it on those brown paper bags. But invisible acts of kindness don't show up on budget reports. And in March, the school board made an announcement. Due to ongoing budget shortfalls, staffing cuts would be necessary. Food services would be reduced by one position. Mrs. Mitchell was the oldest, the most expensive because of her seniority, the most expendable. The principal called her into his office on a Thursday afternoon. "Mrs. Mitchell, I want you to know this wasn't my decision." She sat across from him, hands folded in her lap, face expressionless. "The board has decided to eliminate your position effective at the end of this semester. You'll receive 2 weeks severance and your accumulated vacation pay. I'm very sorry." Mrs. Mitchell nodded slowly. "I understand. If you need a recommendation letter for another position, I'd be happy to." "That won't be necessary. Thank you." She stood, turned, and walked out. The principal watched her go, feeling vaguely guilty, but also relieved the conversation was over. He had 14 other problems to deal with that day. He had no idea what he'd just done. That evening, Mrs. Mitchell sat in her small apartment, a one-bedroom place she'd lived in for 20 years, and did the math. No job meant no income. Her savings were almost non-existent. Social Security wouldn't be enough to cover rent and expenses. She'd have to find another job, probably 2, just to survive. But that wasn't what made her hands shake as she held her calculator. It was the brown paper bags. Without this job, she couldn't help those kids anymore. She wouldn't know who needed food. She wouldn't be there to see the signs. She wouldn't be able to quietly pass them a meal when no one was looking. 43 students would go back to being hungry, and there was nothing she could do about it. 2 weeks later, a 7th grader named Jamie Martinez stopped coming to school. Jamie was 12 years old, thin, quiet, the kind of kid who sat in the back of every classroom and tried not to be noticed. She qualified for the free lunch program, which meant she came from a household living below the poverty line. She also came through Mrs. Mitchell's line every single day with the same routine. She'd take her tray, sit alone, eat slowly, making every bite last, and then quietly ask if there were any extra vegetables or fruit left over. Mrs. Mitchell always said yes. And every single day for 2 years, Mrs. Mitchell had slipped Jamie one of those brown paper bags as she left the cafeteria. "For dinner," Mrs. Mitchell would whisper, "and breakfast tomorrow." Jamie would nod, tuck the bag into her backpack, and disappear into the hallway. But now, Jamie was gone. Day 1, teachers assumed she was sick. Day 2, the attendance office called her home number. No answer. Day 3, a school counselor was sent to her last known address. What they found made everyone stop talking. Jamie and her mother were living in a car, a 20-year-old sedan parked behind a grocery store 3 miles from the school. They'd been evicted from their apartment 6 weeks earlier. Her mother worked 2 jobs, but still couldn't afford first and last month rent for a new place. They'd been sleeping in that car for over a month. And for over a month, the food Mrs. Mitchell gave Jamie every day had been the only reliable meals they'd had. But now, Mrs. Mitchell was about to be fired. The brown paper bags had stopped, and Jamie, who'd been walking 3 miles each way to school every day just to get those meals, had stopped. Because what was the point? The school counselor, a woman named Andrea Reeves, found Jamie and her mother parked behind the grocery store. She brought them back to the school, got them connected with social services, started the process of finding emergency housing. And then she asked Jamie a question. "Sweetie, how have you been eating? Your mom said money's been so tight." Jamie looked down at her hands. "Mrs. Mitchell." "What?" "Mrs. Mitchell, the lunch lady. She gives me food every day for 2 years. She's the reason we're okay." Andrea's breath caught. "She gives you extra food?" Not just me, lots of kids. She puts it in bags and gives it to us after lunch. She says it's for later. Andrea sat very still. How many kids? I don't know, maybe a lot? I see her give bags to other people sometimes. Andrea stood up, walked straight to the principal's office, and that's when the investigation began. The principal, David Morrison, didn't believe it at first. That's impossible. Mrs. Mitchell serves lunch. She can't just be giving away extra food. There are regulations, health codes, portion controls. Then where's Jamie been getting food for 2 years? Andrea said, her voice sharp. She's been living in a car, David. Her mother barely has gas money, but somehow this kid has been eating regularly. Someone's been feeding her. David picked up the phone, called Mrs. Mitchell to his office. She arrived 10 minutes later, apron still on from serving lunch, face calm and unreadable. Mrs. Mitchell, I need to ask you something directly. Have you been giving students extra food? She met his eyes, didn't hesitate. Yes. The room went silent. How long? 15 years. How many students? I don't keep count. Roughly? Mrs. Mitchell paused, as if doing mental math. Maybe 40 or 50 over the years, 10 to 15 at any given time. David's face went pale. You've been giving away school food without authorization for 15 years? No, Mrs. Mitchell said quietly. I've been giving away my own food. I buy it myself, pack it myself. I never take anything from the school kitchen except what would have been thrown away anyway. Andrea leaned forward. You've been using your own money? Yes. For 15 years? Yes. Mrs. Mitchell. Andrea's voice cracked. How much have you spent? Mrs. Mitchell looked out the window, calculated something in her head. I don't know exactly, maybe $15,000, $20,000, maybe more. I never kept track. The room fell silent. David Morrison, the principal who'd signed off on firing her, stared at this woman he'd worked with for 15 years and realized he didn't know her at all. Why? He finally asked. Mrs. Mitchell turned back to him. Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes, something old and deep. Because I know what it feels like to be hungry, and I will never let a child go through that if I can stop it. But knowing the truth and acting on it are two different things. That same evening, while Mrs. Mitchell sat at home unaware, the school board held an emergency closed-door session. 7 board members, 1 superintendent, and a very uncomfortable conversation. The superintendent laid out the situation. A cafeteria worker had been distributing food to students without authorization for 15 years. Health department regulations potentially violated, liability concerns significant, legal exposure real. Thomas Hendricks, a corporate attorney and the board's longest-serving member, spoke first. We have to let her go. This isn't personal, it's policy. She operated outside her authority. She distributed unregulated food. What if a student had gotten sick? What if there was an allergic reaction? We'd be liable for millions. She was feeding hungry children, Lisa Park, a former teacher and the board's newest member, said. With unregulated food from unknown sources, Hendricks countered. From a legal standpoint, this is a textbook case of well-intentioned but unauthorized action creating institutional liability. He wasn't wrong, technically. The superintendent nodded carefully. Our legal counsel recommends immediate termination. We draft a statement emphasizing that we take food safety seriously, that unauthorized distribution violates health codes, and that we're implementing stricter protocols going forward. Lisa Park stared at him. So we fired the woman who spent $20,000 of her own money feeding children? That's the message we want to send? It's the legally defensible message, the superintendent said quietly. Legally defensible, Lisa repeated. Not morally defensible. Not human. The room fell silent. The board president cleared his throat. We'll vote on Thursday. That gives us 48 hours to review options and prepare a statement. This meeting is adjourned. Mrs. Mitchell, sitting in her small apartment 3 miles away, had no idea the board was meeting, had no idea they were debating whether her kindness was a violation or a virtue, had no idea how close she was to losing everything. But Andrea Reeves, the school counselor who'd discovered the truth, knew. She'd been asked to provide documentation for the board meeting. She'd heard the tone in the superintendent's voice. She knew which way this was leaning, and she wasn't going to let them do it quietly. That night, Andrea made 27 phone calls to parents, to former students, to local reporters, to anyone who would listen. "There's a school board meeting Thursday night," she told them. "They're going to fire Mrs. Mitchell. If you've ever been helped by her, if your child has ever benefited from her kindness, you need to be there." By Wednesday morning, the story had leaked to the local newspaper. By Wednesday afternoon, it was on social media. By Thursday morning, the meeting that was supposed to be routine had become something else entirely. Thursday evening, 6 p.m. The school board chambers were packed beyond capacity. Fire marshals had to turn people away at the door. News cameras lined the back wall. Social media was already live streaming. The board hadn't expected this. The superintendent presented his recommendation, voice steady and professional. Terminate Sarah Mitchell's employment, effective immediately. Cite health code violations. Express commitment to food safety. Move forward with updated protocols. Mrs. Mitchell sat in the front row, hands folded in her lap, face expressionless. Inside, her heart was breaking. The board president opened the floor for public comment. But before the first person could approach the microphone, board member Thomas Hendricks raised his hand. "Mr. President, I move that we close public comment and proceed directly to a vote. This has become a media spectacle, but it remains a personnel matter that should be handled with appropriate confidentiality." Mrs. Mitchell's breath caught. "Second," another board member said quietly. The motion was on the table, a vote to silence everyone in that room before they could speak. Jamie Martinez started crying. Marcus Thompson stood up, furious, but security gestured for him to sit. Andrea Reeves gripped the armrest of her chair, knuckles white. They were going to vote, right now, before anyone could defend her. Lisa Park, the former teacher, looked at the superintendent, then at Thomas Hendricks, then out at the packed room, at the crying students, the angry parents, the reporters with cameras rolling. "Point of order," Lisa said, her voice cutting through the murmurs. The board president turned to her. "Yes?" "We have a policy, our own policy, adopted 3 years ago, requiring public comment on any employment termination decision. Closing comment would violate our own rules." The superintendent leaned forward. "That policy allows for discretion in cases involving—" "No," Lisa interrupted, her voice sharp now. "It doesn't. The policy is clear. Public comment shall be heard, not may be heard. Shall. It's mandatory, not discretionary." She looked directly at Hendricks. "And if we vote to silence these people, to fire a woman for feeding children and then silence the children she saved from speaking on her behalf, I will personally ensure that every news outlet in the state knows exactly what this board did tonight." The room went silent. You could hear the cameras recording. Hendricks stared at her for a long moment, then withdrew his motion. "The motion is withdrawn," the board president said quietly. "Public comment is open." One by one, people approached the microphone. Marcus Thompson, the EMT who'd driven 2 hours. "I'm 24 years old. I work as a paramedic. I save lives for a living. But when I was 13, Mrs. Mitchell saved mine. My family was struggling. We had nothing. She gave me food every single day for 2 years. I'm only here because she saw me when everyone else looked away." Kimberly Vasquez, 19, college freshman, crying. "My mother she was struggling with addiction. There were weeks where there was no food in our house. Mrs. Mitchell never asked questions, never made me feel ashamed. She just gave me food, made me feel like I mattered. I'm studying social work now because of her, because someone showed me that people are worth caring about. Deshawn Williams, 16. She's been helping me since 6th grade. Still is. My mom works 3 jobs and we still can't keep up. Mrs. Mitchell packs me dinner, breakfast for the next morning. She asks what I like, what I don't like. She treats me like she's her own kid. Jamie Martinez, the 7th grader who'd been living in a car, stood with her mother. They didn't say anything. They didn't need to. Everyone in that room knew their story. And then Andrea Reeves approached the microphone. She was holding a folder. "I want to read something," Andrea said, her voice steady but emotional. "This is from Sarah Mitchell's immigration records." Mrs. Mitchell looked up, startled. Andrea continued. In 1998, Sarah Mitchell's husband died in a car accident. She lost her apartment. Her and her 8-year-old daughter, Amy, lived in a shelter for 6 months. They went hungry. Government assistance was delayed. Food banks ran out. There were nights where Margaret gave her daughter the only food they had and ate nothing herself. Mrs. Mitchell's eyes filled with tears. She'd never told anyone this. A church volunteer named Ruth helped them, ran a food pantry, saw the desperation in Margaret's eyes, and without asking a single question, packed boxes of groceries and handed them over. She said one thing: everyone deserves to eat. Andrea looked at the board. That moment changed Margaret's life. She got back on her feet, got this job, and for 15 years, she's been paying forward the kindness that saved her and her daughter, spending her own money, her own time, asking nothing in return. She set the folder down on the podium. You're not deciding whether to fire a cafeteria worker who broke a policy. You're deciding whether kindness is a violation, whether feeding children is a crime, whether this system values compliance over compassion. Andrea's voice cracked. Sarah Mitchell lost everything once. Don't make her lose it again for doing what was right. The room erupted in applause. The board president had to gavel for order. The board didn't just reverse the firing. They created a new position. Student nutrition advocate, gave it a real budget, hired Mrs. Mitchell to run it, doubled her salary. But that wasn't all. A community fundraiser was launched. Within 2 weeks, it had raised over $150,000. Half of it went to Mrs. Mitchell, repayment with interest for the 15 years she'd spent feeding children. The other half went to establish the Sarah Mitchell Emergency Food Fund, a program that would provide meals to any student in need, no questions asked, no shame attached. 6 months later, 5:30 a.m., Sarah Mitchell unlocked the cafeteria kitchen, just like she had for 15 years. But she wasn't alone anymore. 4 parent volunteers were already there preparing breakfast. A local bakery had donated fresh bread and pastries. A grocery store sent weekly deliveries of fruit, milk, and supplies. The Sarah Mitchell Emergency Food Fund had a full-time coordinator, a budget, a system. Over 100 students were receiving meals every week. No paperwork, no shame, no questions asked. The program had expanded to 3 other schools in the district. At 7:15 a.m., students started arriving for breakfast. Mrs. Mitchell stood at the counter, as she always had, serving food. A girl approached, 7th grade, thin, quiet, new to the school. Mrs. Mitchell hadn't seen her before. The girl hesitated at the counter, looking at the trays of food. "Can I?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Is there breakfast? I can't." Mrs. Mitchell smiled, the same gentle smile she'd given 43 other children over 15 years. "Of course. Take whatever you'd like. And if you need something to take with you for later, just let me know, okay?" The girl's eyes filled with tears. "Really? You're sure?" Mrs. Mitchell reached across the counter and gently touched her hand. "Really, you're not alone here. You don't have to be hungry. Not anymore." The girl took a tray, selected a bagel, some fruit, a juice box. Her hands were shaking slightly. As she turned to leave, she looked back at Mrs. Mitchell. "Thank you," she whispered. Mrs. Mitchell nodded. "Come back tomorrow." That's what Sarah Mitchell had wanted all along. Not recognition, not headlines, not a position with her name on it. Just a world where a hungry child could ask for food and hear one word: yes. Sarah Mitchell spent 15 years being invisible, 15 years feeding children in secret, 15 years sacrificing everything without asking for anything in return. She did it because she knew what hunger felt like, what desperation felt like, what it meant to be seen when everyone else looked away. And now, because her story was finally told, dozens of other children won't have to know that feeling. That's the power of hidden heroes. They don't change the world with grand gestures. They change it one quiet act of kindness at a time. One brown paper bag, one child, one moment of being seen. And sometimes, just sometimes, when their stories are finally told, the world changes a little faster. This is Hidden Heroes. If Sarah Mitchell's story moved you, subscribe for more stories about the people who change lives in silence. And tell us, who's the hidden hero in your life? Someone who deserves to be seen? Leave their name in the comments, because everyone deserves to be seen.